So, longtime viewers of this channel might remember my old Deafheaven tier list from back in 2021 when Infinite Granite came out. That video sucks. Not only do the opinions feel misguided and way too influenced by a certain bald man with glasses, but also just the editing and just everything about it and the camera quality is ass. So that's why, now that they have a new album out, I've decided to make a new tier list. That's pretty self-explanatory. I don't know why I felt the need to say that. Deafheaven are a post-metal band from San Francisco that have been active since 2010, originally forming as a duo consisting of vocalist George Clark and guitarist Kerry McCoy. Known for innovating and popularizing the shoegaze and black metal fusion genre known as blackgaze, they initially came in riding the tail end of the 2000s American black metal wave, originally sounding similar to contemporaries such as Wolves in the Throne Room, before expanding their sound to incorporate a multitude of influences, including screamo, dream pop, post-rock, and even thrash metal. As of this year, they've released 6 studio albums, as well as a demo, a live album, and a few standalone singles. Even when they're not putting out their best or most consistent material, they always find a way to inject so much powerful emotion and catharsis into everything they create, both instrumentally and lyrically. They've been one of my favorite bands since I initially discovered them in high school, and the ambitious and eclectic nature of their music makes them, in my opinion, one of the most fun modern music projects to discuss and analyze with other fans. You'll notice real quick here that I have made the F tier, I've replaced it with a Great Songs category. And that is because Deafheaven have, like I said, a few non-album singles. I feel like it would be unfair to rank them amongst the albums since, like, it's just one song versus a whole album of songs. Like, obviously, I'm gonna, put most of them in, like, the A tier because they're good songs. But I didn't want to not talk about them because I feel like in order to fully understand Deafheaven's evolution as a band, those singles are kind of integral to that understanding, so I still wanted to include them. But yeah, I made a separate category for the great songs. So let's start at the beginning, of course, with their 2010 demo. So this demo was actually recorded with just an acoustic guitar, bass, and garage band drums by Kerry and George when they initially formed the band, and considering the conditions under which it was made, it sounds really good and full for what it is. Like, it's a great proof of concept for the band. It definitely leans a lot harder in that kind of, like, traditional atmospheric black metal sound. Like I said, a lot like Wolves in the Throne Room, but the shoegaze and screamo influences are very much there from the get-go, just not as pronounced as they would become on later projects. And while I think that the demo does have highlights such as Daedalus, it's a very short project and pretty repetitive, it's pretty one note, but for what it is, it's pretty awesome. Like, it's still a very enjoyable listen. It's definitely not nearly one of their best works, but it's still really good, which is why I'm going to put it over here in the B tier. Moving on from there, we have their debut studio album, Roads to Judah. This was where they signed on to Death Wish Records, which was putting out, like, some of the most interesting and innovative hardcore and metal releases of the time. They pretty much stuck with, like, the same sound as they had on the demo, but really kind of expanded on some of the more dreamy post-rock influences, and that's especially apparent in the first track, Violet, which, in my opinion, is, like, probably their first, like, real masterpiece of a song. I love the build-up in it. It's so hazy and psychedelic and, like, really mournful. It's a really sad and dark song about drug use. If you had asked me when I first got into Deafheaven what my favorite song of theirs was, I probably would have said Violet. The songs after that on this album, though, they don't stand out as much. I would say that they're, like, pretty great, pretty solid, and they have some, like, really beautiful and standout moments, especially the end of the last track, Tunnel of Trees, which utilizes a piano in, like, this really beautiful kind of way. It's definitely a step up from the demo, but it's still a far cry from their best work, so I'm also going to put it in the B tier, but I'm going to put it above the demo. So next up, we have the first non-album single, and that is their cover of the Mogwai songs Punk Rock and Cody, which they put as like one single track on their split with fellow California post-metal, black metal band Boston Age. And, you know, since it's a cover, I guess there's not really like a whole lot to say in terms of like their songwriting, because it's not their song, but it is a pretty unique and pretty sick cover. I love the way that they turn this very gentle, pretty kind of post-rock song into a metal song while still maintaining the general vibe of the original song. It's very melancholic, dreary, depressing. Really, in terms of the evolution of the band's sound, I think what is important about this cover is that it's really where they started leaning a lot harder into their post-rock influences and making something that sounds like almost kind of uplifting. Like, these first two projects here are pretty dark. Even in their kind of more like prettier melodic moments, they're much darker, much more in line with like what else was going on in black metal at the time. But this cover is where they started to explore that more like serene, kind of beautiful feeling while still keeping it very sad, of course. So that's going to be our first great song down here. Not the band's first great song, of course, but the first standalone single for that category. So next up, we have the legendary classic 2013 album, Sunbather. This changed everything. And it was also extremely controversial when it first came out. I was like 9 years old when the album came out, so I don't, remember it personally, but I remember just like going on the internet and finding like all the things that people were saying about this album at the time, and all the like black metal fans that were just calling it terrible and like just an absolute disgrace to the genre. I don't know. I'm not really going to talk too much about that because it's just frustrating to me when fandoms just get all hot and bothered over a band doing something different and innovative within the genre. But I'm glad they did, because this is a beautiful, monumental, emotional behemoth of a record. And that's apparent like immediately in the first track, Dreamhouse, which in my opinion, they still haven't topped to this day. Beautiful progression. The ending is like one of the most like ascensional moments in like any metal song or any song really I've ever heard. Vertigo is another one of my favorites from this record. It's just a super long, like sludgy, progressive kind of piece. I think the reason why this album also connects with me is I think that this is where they really started leaning more on those like screamo and post-hardcore influences that they've always had, but like they really come through in this record. It sounds a lot like classic screamo bands like Envy, with like the big cathartic build-ups and releases of tension. It's just like a magnificent record to this day. I think like the biggest criticism you could say for it is that it sounds like a little bit one note at times. Like the production is very like, it's like one thing. It's like this wall of sound throughout the whole record, which like, yeah, it can get a little bit repetitive, but I think it's made up for in the fact that the songwriting is just so top tier, and the wall of sound kind of works for me. It gives it like this very like heavy shoegazy vibe throughout. In terms of variety, they really utilize interludes in a great way on this record. You have Irresistible, which is a very pretty guitar piece. Please Remember, which is more of like a drone ambient kind of thing. Yeah, just really can't sing the praises of this record enough. It's like low-key the album that got me into heavier music more broadly. Like it kind of blew my mind when I first heard it. It's just really insane and really impressive to me that they made like a masterpiece this early on in their discography. And that's why it's going right in the S tier. Like, no joke, no question. I don't think any fan of the band would deny this the S tier status, and if they did, they're wrong. They're just wrong. Like, I don't know what to say. This is an incredible fucking album. So then next after that, we have From the Kettle Unto the Coil, which was a non-album single that they released in 2014. This song is interesting. I really like it. I love like the heavier riffs, the more prettier, serene parts. I think the purpose that this serves in their discography was it was sort of like a segue where it still has a lot of elements of that Sunbather sound, but it has bolder, heavier, more like traditionally like metal kind of production, which is like what they would end up doing on their next record, which we'll talk about in a minute. And it also has like heavier riffs, more like straightforward black metal riffs in the mix as well. It's not a song that I necessarily return to like individually all the time, but it's a really, really sick track, and if someone said this was their favorite Deafheaven song or one of their favorites, I would not blame them at all. It's a really good song, and yeah, it really plays a pivotal role in their transition from Sunbather to New Bermuda, which we'll talk about in a second here. But I'm going to put this in the great songs category. I'm going to put it above the Mogwai cover. Next up, we have their 2015 third album, New Bermuda. This record is amazing. I can see how, like, a fan of Sunbather or their earlier work might find it a bit jarring on first listen because the production is way bolder, way more in your face. It's not so, like, wall of sound, shoegazy. This is a heavy fucking album compared to what came before it. And that's apparent, like, right from the first track, Brought to the Water, where you have, like, super heavy, like, thrashy riffs at the beginning, so, like, powerful, and George's vocals are, like, chanting. It's like, it's, like, just super fiery and passionate. And then towards the end of the song, you go into these more like melodic, uplifting riffs that are still super chunky and heavy, but like just prettier. And then Luna is sort of like structured similarly, where it starts out a lot heavier and then it kind of like goes into some prettier parts and then gets like super pretty at the end. And I really like the closing track as well, Gifts for the Earth, which goes in this interesting sort of like emo post-punk kind of direction where it's like the metal influences are really toned down and it's like a lot more like indie rock, I guess. To me, the biggest detractors from this album are the third and fourth tracks, which aren't bad. Like, I still enjoy listening to them. It's not like I skip them when I'm listening to the album, but structurally, they just feel a bit confused. Like, for example, Baby Blue ends with just this long, like, chugging guitar outro, which sounds cool, like, for the first half minute or minute that you hear it, but then it just kind of keeps going and going and going. You're like, where is this going? Come Back, I think, is, like, even worse in that regard, because, like, halfway through the song, it just completely switches to this, like, long, drawn-out, like, dream pop section that's, like, super sleepy and hazy and just kind of, like, you know, it's pretty, it's nice while it's on, but it ultimately just kind of goes nowhere. It is only 47 minutes, which makes it a shorter and more digestible record compared to some of Deafheaven's other albums, which are, like, an hour or an hour plus, and I still love it. Like, it's still one of my favorite albums of theirs, but I think the two songs that kind of drag it down are sort of indicative of the songwriting direction they were going in that was, you know, maybe not quite it. So I would say it's got like 3 S tier songs and 2 B tier songs, so it's only fair to put it in the A tier. Not perfect, but really, really, really good. So next up we have their 4th studio album, Ordinary Corrupt Human Love, from 2018. I used to not like this album so much. I thought it was bloated. I thought that a lot of the songs were kind of just like mediocre and just went nowhere. I still kind of feel that way. It really depends, you know, because I think this album really has some incredible moments. I mean, I've really come around on it in a lot of ways. I think Honeycomb is an incredible song. I love the kind of like Oasis-y Britpop influenced guitar solos, which is like so weird and wild and just kind of like insane to incorporate into a black metal album. This isn't really a black metal album, I'm gonna be honest, and I'm not even saying that in like a gatekeepy, like hater kind of way. I think the band themselves would agree. Jesus fucking Christ. I think the band themselves would agree this isn't really like a black metal album. It's like this weird sort of like shoegazy, like indie prog metal combination. In a lot of areas it really works. You Without End, the opening track, I used to really not like that song, but like recently to make this video, I put on the album and I just heard it and I was like, this is beautiful. Like, what was I missing this whole time? It's like 70s prog meets like modern post-rock with like black metal vocals. It's fucking awesome. I think Glint is another really good song. That one definitely has a much more straightforward kind of structure, and like most of the end is just a really long guitar solo, but it's fun and it's awesome. Otherwise, I'm a little bit like so-so on this record. I think Canary Yellow is pretty great, but it also is kind of indicative of like a problem I have with the album as a whole, which is like it's just like way too self-indulgent and like I guess overambitious to a fault. It's still got some really sick moments, which is why I can't hate on it too much, but it's just too much. This is too much. I'm gonna be so honest. And I really kind of think that the ending of the album is weak. I think everything after Glint I could kind of take or leave. Worthless Animal does have some cool parts, but overall I think again it's just too long for what it is, and has some moments that I'm just like, okay, can we go somewhere with this? But I really can't bring myself to like give it like anything below a B tier, because it does have just like so many great moments within the songs. And I think, as we get more into the video and I talk about their most recent record, I think in a lot of ways Lonely People with Power would not exist were it not for this album in particular, because I think the concept that they tried on this album, which is like, let's just do a little bit of everything, like heavy riffs, dream pop, like this kind of thing, that kind of thing, I think that's very much what they tried to do again and did a lot better, in my opinion. But we're going to put this in the B tier. Initially, I was kind of debating, like, do I want to put this above or below Roads to Judah? Because I think in a lot of ways, I think they're like kind of like equally good for different reasons. I think Roads to Judah is a much more consistent album, and it's a shorter, more digestible listen compared to Ordinary Corrupt Human Love, which is a lot longer and a lot more self-indulgent and really asks a lot more of the listener. But I ultimately decided that like it really does have a lot more standout moments than Roads to Judah does, and a lot more variation, which makes it like a bit more of a fun listen, even if Roads to Judah is a more consistent listen. So I'm going to put it above Roads to Judah, but they're pretty much equal. So next up is their non-album single from, I think, 2019, called Black Brick. Now, this song, like, came out of nowhere, because it was then and still is probably the heaviest song the band has ever made. Like, there's no shoegaze, emo, or screamo, or like post-rock going on in this song. It is just pure thrashy, heavy, insane black metal with like some riffs that kind of border on like death metal at times, which is really, really awesome. Like, I just love this sound. It's like very influenced by 2000s era Immortal, but in my opinion, kind of even better and even heavier in a lot of ways. And the more like atmospheric, but still very dark and heavy ending of the track is spectacular as well. But then in the first half, you have like these crazy chugs and winding, disorienting, just awesome riffs. Like, I don't know how else to put it. I fucking love this song. And it really did come out of nowhere, because they had just put out Ordinary Corrupt Human Love, which is like one of their softer albums. Like, there was a lot more dream pop and kind of like quieter, sadder, twinkly passages on that album. And then they were like, no, fuck it. Our next song is just gonna be super heavy, super intense, super metal, and I kind of love it for that. I love that they just like keep people on their toes, and it's like, you think we're going in this direction, but we're actually going to go in this direction. I'm going to put it at the top of the great songs category, because it is really, really, really awesome. So next up we have 10 Years Gone, which is the in-studio live album that they released in 2020 during the height of the pandemic to celebrate their 10-year anniversary of being a band. And I think it's a really good way to celebrate, honestly, because it's sort of like a retrospective featuring songs from their entire discography up until that point, with like most of the emphasis being placed on Sunbather. There's like 3 songs from Sunbather on this album and like 1 song from every other album. I think what's really cool about it is you get to hear the band in like a live setting performing together, with like, the little flaws and hiccups here and there that kind of give it like a more natural, human, organic feel. And to record them all in this way and produce them similarly sort of unites these songs that are from various albums that have very different production styles and aesthetics, making it like a pretty cohesive listen despite being kind of stylistically all over the place. I wouldn't necessarily say that I would take any of these songs over their studio versions, but it's still a great live album. Really fun listen, and I'm going to put it in the A tier. You might think that, like, it's a little unfair of me to do that, because, like, it is kind of, in a way, like, a greatest hits compilation, since it features, like, some of their best songs from their discography throughout the 2010s. But I think it stands on its own as, like, its own separate project, its own album, and for, like, hardcore fans, I would absolutely say it's worth a listen. So I'm going to put it in the A tier. So next up, we have their 2021 album, Infinite Granite. This was another one I used to really, really not like. Like, I hated this album when it came out. And, like, partially I think I was, just, like, a little bit too much of a Fantano fanboy. And since he hated the record, I was like, yeah, it sucks. I don't feel that way anymore. I think for myself now. Thank you very much. I still think it's a very flawed album. I won't lie. Maybe not, maybe very flawed is too harsh, but it's probably their weakest record still. I think that the songwriting approach, while it does produce some like really beautiful and incredible moments, it also kind of like gets a little boring at times and sometimes becomes more like background music, and I think the songs are too long for what they are. I should probably mention the central difference between this album and their other records is that it is not a metal album whatsoever. It has metal elements, but it is way more leaning into the shoegaze and dream pop side of their sound than anything else, and it mostly features clean vocals. There's like a few screamed moments here and there, and I think part of the reason why at the time it was so polarizing and why I really didn't like it was because I was worried that that was the direction they were going in. Like, that's what they were going to be from now on, just like a mid-tier shoegaze act. But I kind of realize in retrospect that that was a really stupid thing to think, considering they had just put out like their heaviest song ever 2 or 3 years earlier. But yeah, I think Infinite Granite has some great moments. I think Shell Star, the opening track, is a beautiful song. Again, kind of like drags on a bit too long at the end, but it has like some really nice elements to it. Great Massive Color is a banger. The closing track, Mombasa, which gets like more heavy and kind of black metal-y at the end, also really cool, kind of progressive song. And there's some other memorable moments and really nice tracks and stuff, but overall, like, much of this album is kind of forgettable, and I think one of its biggest flaws outside of the songwriting is that George Clark is a much better harsh vocalist than he is a clean vocalist. I think his cleans can be like just a little too kind of like nasally and annoying at times, and like not in a good way, not like, I don't know, Billy Corgan, but kind of more like a little annoying, a little obnoxious, a little monotonous. I don't think he's a bad singer, and I think if he works on his vocals, he could be an even better singer, but he can't really carry the album, I'll be so honest. With that being said, knowing now that they have no intentions of completely abandoning their roots as a metal band, I would love to see them try to make a shoegaze album again. Maybe, mix it up a bit, add in like some other elements, be it, more progressive influences, more metal moments, whatever it is. I would love to see them try something like this again. I didn't think it went over like super well with this record, but I definitely am a lot more fond of this album now than I was when it initially came out. I would say it's solid. It's not great. It's not something I would return to all that often, but it's, it's pretty good. It's pretty good for what it is. I'm going to put it in the C tier. And that brings us to their most recent album, released just like a little over a month ago, Lonely People with Power. This album is incredible. This album is astonishingly good. Like, I cannot exaggerate the sheer excitement and just like visceral enjoyment and glee that I got out of this record the first time I listened to it, because this is the album I have like low-key always wanted from Deafheaven. Always. Like, ever since I started listening to them, ever since I got into them and like listened to all their records, this is the album that I always knew they had in them and that I always knew they could make. And that's also kind of why I found myself disappointed with records like Infinite Granite and Ordinary Corrupt Human Love. Because while I have come around on those albums, especially since Lonely People with Power has been released, I've kind of gone back and realized how important those albums are to building up and evolving the band's sound to get to the point that they're at now. It was frustrating for me to hear these albums that I thought were just inconsistent and flawed, because I knew they had it in them to make something that was way more consistent and way more engaging than those albums. Now I've finally gotten the album that I've always wanted from Deafheaven. Everything the band had done up until this point, from super heavy, thrashy black metal to dream pop, shoegaze, kind of indie rock influenced stuff, big like soaring progressive tracks. Amethyst is like a beautiful song. That was a like mind-bending song the first time I heard it, and even now it's so psychedelic, ever evolving. It's hard to describe in words, honestly. Revelator is this insane, super dissonant, weird, crazy black metal song. Doberman has that like metalcore breakdown in the middle of it. That's going to be really fun to experience live. But then I also love the more low-key moments. Heathen is a banger. It's like super catchy. I think George Clark's singing works best when it's used sparingly. It comes up at the beginning of Heathen and at a couple moments in the incredible, beautiful closing track, The Marvelous Orange Tree, and I think it works in those contexts. Winona is such a beautiful and poetic song for the band because it sounds like Dreamhouse. It literally sounds like a spiritual successor or recreation of what the band did with Dreamhouse. The progression and just everything about it, the quieter part, the way the riff during the quieter part comes back during the like super heavy climactic ending. It's just such a beautiful and just like emotionally destructive song. Like it leaves you like exhausted by the end of it. I said this in my top albums of March video, but I think it's really interesting how the lyrics on this album are kind of like looking back on George Clark's childhood and, you know, really discussing and thinking about a lot of the ways in which his childhood experiences and traumas affected him in the long term. He's usually writing in the moment. Sunbather is like a very lovesick, sort of like heartbreaking album. New Bermuda is a lot more dark and hopeless. Ordinary Corrupt Human Love is like a little bit more joyful. And they all kind of like coincide with, I think, like what's going on in his life. And Lonely People with Power, I imagine, does too in some ways. But it's also looking back a lot, like much in the same way that the band is looking back on everything they've done and kind of incorporating elements of all of it to make this like super like all-encompassing beautiful record. He's also going back and looking at his prior experiences that have affected who he is and the person he is today. I would actually say that if you're a new Deafheaven fan, or if you're looking to get into the band, probably start here. Really, I cannot think of a better way to get into the band because it really covers everything they've done and does it in a super incredible way that's just so tight and so well written and well put together. I'm like struggling to come up with ways to describe how good this album is. I just think you have to listen to it for yourself. And honestly, I'm at a loss here, because Sunbather changed and affected my life in ways that are hard for me to put into words. And I think to some degree, it'll always be my favorite. But maybe it's just recency bias. Maybe it's just the fact that this album has been in regular rotation for me ever since it came out. I'm gonna say, yeah. I might go back on that, you know? I might change my mind on that at some point. But I really, truly, and honestly think that Lonely People with Power is Deafheaven's best album. And that feels crazy to say, because I love Sunbather. I don't know. Like, I feel weird about it. Like, I feel that feels wrong. But I think that's true. I think that's genuinely how I feel as of right now. So, yeah. I'm just going to leave it like that. So here's my tier list. I've cleaned it up and made it look a little prettier. If you're new to the band, like I said, I would recommend starting with Lonely People with Power. And then from there, I would go Sunbather, and then New Bermuda, and then Ordinary Corrupt Human Love. Those are kind of like the 4 essentials, in my opinion, to like understanding their sound and the evolution of their sound. Pretty much everything else you can kind of like listen to at your own pace, kind of like go where you want to from there. But I would say like these 4, that's really like the best way I can recommend getting into them. Like 1, 2, 3, 4. As for where I'm hoping Deafheaven will go from here, I would love to hear them try to do like a more shoegaze oriented album again, like Infinite Granite, but maybe make it a bit heavier, a bit more emo or screamo influenced. Another direction that I think would be cool is for them to do like just straight up like thrashy black metal, but include some of those like atmospheric, like weird dissonant kind of touches. Like, I would really love to hear them go more in the direction of the song Revelator. I think that's one of the most unique songs they've made, and I would love to hear them go further in that direction. But I don't know. I mean, they are so eclectic and ambitious with the stuff that they do that I think that listeners will just always be kept on their toes about what they're going to be doing next. And yeah, whatever it is, I'm here for it. I'm along for the ride. Thank you so much for watching this video. I really hope you enjoyed. I hope you got something out of it. If you're a Deafheaven fan, let me know what you think. Let's talk about it in the comments. Let's hash it out. Maybe you think Infinite Granite is the best album known to man. In which case, cool. Cool. It's a good album, but it's just not my favorite. As always, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe if you're new to the channel. This has been Mavis Evelyn, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.